You are listening to How to Get Over Your Ex, episode number 129, Recreating Your Identity After Your Breakup. Welcome to How to Get Over Your Ex, a podcast on getting over your ex without it just taking time. I'm your host, Breakup Coach Dorothy. Let's turn your pain into power and your heartbreak into happy. Hello, my beautiful brave hearts. How is everyone doing today? I am bringing on a special guest named Patty. We are talking primarily about recreating your identity, but she does talk about but a lot of her experience within the Get Over Your Ex program. We go off on a little bit of a tangent. I just want to say this out front. We go on a little bit of like a teaching, journey, experience conversation for the first about 10 minutes. So if you are here specifically to listen about recreating your identity, I would just fast forward about 10 minutes if you don't want to hear, the beginning part of her journey, which is very important and very impactful. So I love it. I think it's great. But if you're wanting to only be listening to the recreating your identity piece, just go ahead and skip forward a little bit. No problem. Awesome. I'm going to let you get started without further ado. Hello, my beautiful brave hearts. How is everybody doing? Today, I have a very special guest for you. Her name is Patty. I'm going to let her introduce herself, but I am so pumped to have her here today to talk to you all about recreating your identity after a breakup. If you're anything like me, the visual that I have about identity when it comes to a breakup is a city that's full of these like buildings. And when I went through my breakup, it felt like all those buildings just like crumbled around me. I had built up this city and this beautiful, amazing like identity of myself. And then all of a sudden it was crumbling around me. And that's very scary when you're in it. But it's a very empowering place to be, to start from scratch and start building those towers and those buildings bigger and better. And Patty is going to tell you all about it and to tell you and share her experience with it. So I'm so excited to have you here, Patty. Thank you so much for being here, sharing your words of wisdom, everything that the Bravehearts are going to learn in this episode. Can you start by just giving us like a short introduction, a little bit about who you are, where you are, if you want to share what you do, and then we can just kind of dive into your breakup journey. How does that sound?
Sure, that sounds great. Thank you so much for having me on. As I was saying to you earlier, this definitely is a full circle moment for me because I remember just being in the thick of my heartbreak and listening to your podcast and just in my mind thinking like, oh my gosh, if I could be on that podcast one day, I know I would have made it. I would have made it. I'd be okay. I'd be on my own. So as Dorothy said, my name is Patty. I'm currently living in Rhode Island with my beautiful, wonderful 1-year-old Scotty dog, Murray, who I am just so obsessed with. I'm an audiologist. I just graduated with my doctorate in audiology this past spring. So I'm very new to the audiology world. But yeah, so right now I'm in the thick of recreating my identity for sure. So I'm really excited to talk about this topic today.
Yes, amazing. Okay, so tell people kind of where you started. So tell us about what happened in your breakup for what you feel comfortable sharing with the world. What happened in your breakup? What led you to signing up? And then we'll kind of go from there. Hold on. I want to talk about where were you? What led you to signing up? And then where are you now that you've finished the program?
Sure. Yeah. So a little bit about my breakup. I was living in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the last 4 years. So it was about 10 hours-ish away from all my friends and family. I moved out there. I didn't know a single soul, but I was excited to start my doctoral program. About a year into the program, I met my now ex-boyfriend, and we hit it off right away. Like it was like that instant connection. We had a really great time. It was definitely my very best friend ever, I guess you could say. And we we lived together. So for my last 3 years of the program, we lived together, had a really great relationship. I definitely felt that this was the person I was meant to marry and start a family with, and grow old together. Um, and then my last year of my program, it's called an externship year. So you actually get out of the academic setting and you go towards a full-time clinical setting, kind of like a residency year, you could say. Um, and I decided that I was going to stay in Pittsburgh to do my externship year so we could be together still. And then after that, in my mind, I had created this most beautiful, perfect image of that we were both going to move together and start a great life closer to my family back home. And so I had a wonderful externship year in Pittsburgh. I was working at a children's hospital. It was amazing. And then it came time for graduation, and I could tell he started to get a little bit of cold feet about the whole transition and moving on and that kind of thing. And so ultimately, we did end up both moving to Rhode Island, and he was here about, I want to say, 3 weeks. And then he was going back to Pittsburgh to finish up some work there. And then a week after that, he called me up on the phone and ended our relationship over the phone. And I was completely devastated, like shattered. My whole world felt like it, like you were just saying, like all these buildings came like crumbling down. I remember just like falling to my kitchen floor, like, oh my gosh, the world is ending. So I was straight up just a mess, devastated. And I do have a twin sister who, her and I are very much into life coaching. We've worked with life coaches the last 3 years. We love, 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 love thought work. And of course, I was in the thick of my heartbreak, and I definitely was not, being productive with my thoughts whatsoever. And she had sent me your podcast, and she was like, I know you're in the thick of your heartbreak, but just tomorrow morning, take a breath, wake up, and start listening to Dorothy's podcast. And so I did. And I listened to it just like, I feel like everyone always says, from the moment I woke up in the morning, I would listen to it, getting ready for the day on my drive, wherever I was going, getting ready for bed at night. So I finished like all the episodes, I think like in 2 days. It was crazy. Um, and just around that time, you were starting, I think it was round 6 of the program, the Get Over Your Ex program. And I was like I was waffling back and forth with the idea. I was like, should I do it? Should I not do it? And because it was so soon, I think it was only a couple weeks after the breakup, I was like, feeling in my heart, like, oh, we're going to get back together. This is all going to be a terrible nightmare. Like, it's all going to be fine. So I didn't end up signing up. And I was like, I can just listen to the podcast and, do the work on my own, and it's all going to be fine. And then I would say, like, as weeks went by, I was like, no, it's not fine. Like, I need Dorothy's expertise. Like, I need her help. And I just remember listening to your podcast and the other guest speakers that you had on, and people who were in the program, and how successful they were, and how they seemed like they were living such full lives now. And so I remember I reached out to you, and I was like, I know that enrollment's not starting for a bit for round 7, but can you please put me on the list? And I'm just so thankful for that girl who signed up that day, because it truly did change my life in so many ways. Um, I know, like, a big thing for me was when I went through the breakup, I felt like my whole world changed. So I started second guessing, is this the right career choice for me? Is this the right place I want to be living? Like, everything started to go into question. So I felt like I was really showing up to my life with so much resistance. Um, and I definitely was not being open or accepting of change, right? Like, I had this perfect plan. I had everything planned out. Like, now the plan, was gone. I didn't even know where to turn. So that's what led me to signing up for the program. Um, and then from there, how the program worked for me, I definitely had, big hopes. I was like, okay, like, this is it. Like, I've made it. I can start to change things. But I didn't really realize how much of a change my life was going to have. For starters, the very first thing was the support in the fellow Bravehearts. I, never anticipated having such great connection with our group. I feel like every group can say that they had the best group, but I definitely feel like our group was really incredible. Um, and even to this day, we still connect together on the WhatsApp, and every day someone's like, writing in there, like just checking in, that kind of thing. So even though like our round has finished, the 3 months came to an end, like we still talk to each other every day. So like that's been an incredible aspect of the program that I never, really truly knew that I was going to be getting that. Um, and then I think what I started to learn was, in the beginning, it was so much that my thoughts were focused on him and, how could this have happened? But then my thoughts slowly started to transition over to myself, and how can I start creating that bigger and better life for myself? And I started to realize that I really didn't want the focus to be on my breakup anymore. Like it used to be like the every consuming thought of my day. And then I realized that now my thoughts were like, what else is my brain capable of putting that energy towards? You know what I
Oh,
mean?
such a good point. Can we just take a second to emphasize that? Because that's something all of you can do right now is think about what thoughts are centered around him. How often are you looking at an emotion saying, I'm feeling distraught, I'm feeling betrayed, I'm feeling angry because, and my thought is, he did this or he did that or he's something and he's whatever. An amazing tool that you can do is take that and say, I guess I would love to do a real life example. Do you remember one of your thoughts that was about him that was reoccurring?
I think that a huge thought for me was that it was all on, like, he made all the decisions. I never got a say.
Okay. Right. So looking at, okay, so I'm feeling, what was the emotion when you thought that? So you thought he got to make all the decisions, I didn't make any, and you felt
Very angry. Yes,
angry.
super
Yes.
angry. Yep.
So then looking at, what does that really mean? What's the real problem? Why is that a problem that he made all of the decisions? And where did you land with that?
In my mind, I was making it mean that he destroyed like the whole future that I had going, and that
Mhm.
I couldn't have any of that future. With
Right. So, yeah. So listen to that. Right. So he made all the decisions, which I'm making mean I don't get the future that I want. And then looking at that thought and questioning that just because, so taking, this specific example, it's like, number one, did he really make all the decisions? Like you always had a decision. You allowed him to make those decisions for you. Maybe that's even just a maybe, right? Like there are definitely probably some decisions that were made by you. There's no way you went through that entire relationship and never made a single decision. But
yeah.
because we're thinking he made all the decisions, we're looking and finding that evidence. And then, secondly, does it truly mean that because my ex made X number of decisions, you could like quantify it? We always talk about data versus drama. My ex made 3 out of 5 big decisions in my life. Does that truly mean that I can't have the future that I want? And looking at that and questioning that, but looking at more of the I statement thoughts. And if you do have a lot of he statement thoughts, that's not a problem at all. It's just looking at what's a little bit deeper, and it makes it easier to question when you're looking at the real root thought versus some of these other like layered thoughts that are focused around someone else. And it kind of reminds me too of how your thoughts correlate with your results. So we're getting off a bit of a tangent. We will circle back to recreating identity. I just want to do a little bit of teaching here. But think about when you're thinking the thought, he got to choose all of the decisions. He made all of the decisions. That is going to result in, I don't make any decisions now. Right. So he makes all the decisions. It makes me feel angry. When I feel angry, I stew, I ruminate, I look at my past, I look at my future as limited. And that results in, I'm not creating what I want. I'm not making the decisions necessary in this moment to create the results that I want. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it's so mind blowing.
I love it. Such a great example. So let's look back to identity. I know we were talking about a couple of other things, but tell me about, um, the most difficult things you felt when you had no identity without your ex.
Yeah, so I think a big thing for me, like I mentioned before, I was so far from friends and family where I was living that when he and I got together and became such fast friends, I think I put all of my happiness or my safety feelings or my comfort feelings in my relationship with him. Um, so, you know, everything that was great and amazing in life had him part of it. And I was in this very rigorous, stressful program, so I felt like when I met him, it was just, magic. Like, this is paradise, like, this is my escape, everything. So when our relationship ended and I was moving, even though I was moving back closer to home, to my friends, to my family, it was a place that I haven't lived in nearly, 9 years, 10 years. So I had such extreme like panic and anxiety that I was like, oh my gosh, like I know that my friends and family are there, but I just don't even know who I am to show up for them anymore. I thought I was this person who, was getting this great degree, but now I'm feeling iffy about that. And I thought I was this person who met the love of my life, and now he's gone. And so I really just felt like without him, I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know. I started, your brain starts to ruminate into totally panic of, can I even identify what is my favorite color? Like, do I even know what hobbies do I like to do? Like, I know I liked going to the gym with him, but do I like doing that on my own? Like, I started to completely panic about little things like that. And I remember saying that to my family, like, I don't even know who I am. And they're like, of course you do. And I was like, no, I really don't. So that was a major thing for me. I really struggled with that. And I felt like it put me in such a weird place. Like, I felt so uncomfortable in who I was because I couldn't 100% tell myself, like, yes, this is who you are.
What was your biggest, so then tell us what was your turning point? Like, how did you overcome that and where did you get to?
Yeah, so that was a huge thing for me because when the breakup happened and I started to totally second guess, like, career wise and things like that, I was carrying a lot of guilt and shame for the fact that I just, went through all this rigorous 8 years of, schooling, and now I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to do this career anymore. So I started to feel a lot of guilt and shame that I wasn't doing the things that I should be doing, right? Like the shoulds. I always get myself so worked about the shoulds of society. So I decided after listening to some podcast episodes that I was just going to like start off small. I was just going to try to, not be so closed minded about everything. And I remember waking up one morning and I was like, I'm just going to get in my car and get dressed today, get ready for the day, and go get a coffee. And I remember I drove to Starbucks that day and they were like, oh, your coffee's on us today. And I was like, what? Like, that never happened. So then I was like, oh my gosh, this is a sign. Like, I'm doing the right things. And then from there, I ended up getting a babysitting job a couple of days a week for someone I knew from my hometown. And it ended up being the most amazing job because it's so flexible. So it allows me a lot of time to do other things in the day. And it started to remind me how much I seriously love working with kids. So I started feeling happier in the day, the things that I was doing. And I started realizing, like, you know what? I really do want to be a pediatric audiologist. I really do want to be working in audiology. And it was also great because this job allowed me time to still attend all the live calls for the Get Over Your Ex program. So I felt like I was like on this amazing schedule. Like, I was doing all these things that I wanted to be doing. So I was getting up, I was like, going to like a job every day, felt productive. And I was attending all the live calls. And then I was like just getting the thick of the thought work and everything. And I started to do things that sounded great to me, like working out again. And I realized, yeah, I really do love exercising. I loved exercising with my ex, but I love it on my own, the same. So I started slowly like building on these things that I realized I was enjoying doing. And it just kind of all started to fall into place. And I started to meet other audiologists in the area. And now, I've created such amazing new friends. And so I started slowly but surely recreating my identity, not even kidding, by doing something so small, by just getting up and going to get a coffee that one day. It's just the craziest thing.
I love that you said that because I think it's going to help so many people who are just like so stuck that they're like, what's like the first thing I need to do to jumpstart that recreation of my own identity? And I love that you're like, yeah, no, all I had to do was wake up, decide to just get dressed and go get coffee. That was like
Mhm.
the first step. So I love that for all of you brave hearts that are listening right now. If all of this stuff just feels super overwhelming, what would it be like to simply just allow yourself to wake up and get dressed? I wanted to say put on some makeup because that's what I would do, but not everyone wears makeup. Do your hair, right? And then go to Starbucks and get a coffee. That's amazing. I love it. Such a great idea. So then tell me about, where do you feel like you are now when it comes to recreating your identity?
Yeah, so I'm at a major point now because like how I mentioned a couple of times that I was going through such that iffy period of if I even wanted to be doing audiology and that kind of thing. And so a major thing for me was getting to the root of understanding that I'm doing these things because I want to do them and they make me feel good, and not because I should be doing them, right? Like I just went and spent all this time and money and energy and effort into getting this degree. So I should just use it and be happy about it and work the 9 to 5. Um, and so I think that the thought work and the different tools that we learned in the program, it not only was helping me, realize that I could live a life where I was lessening my desire for my ex and starting to really increase my desire for my own life on my own. And it wasn't that I needed him in the picture to have that happy, paradise, amazing life anymore. And so in recreating my identity now, I just feel like I'm starting to make all these new friends and kind of creating my own community here now, like in addition to all of my amazing friends and family that I already have here, and just kind of seeing the new things that I'm really into for sure. And I think the next step really is like getting into an audiology job that I love. But in the meantime, now I think I mentioned to you a little bit, like I've worked with a life coach for so long, and now I'm totally loving this amazing life that I'm creating. So I'm like, why not dive in and jump into life coaching and getting that certification. And I think that was something that was so scary to me because I was like, no, like you already have a career, like you can't do that. But yeah, like it's hearing your story and talking to the different brave hearts and everything. I mean, just at the things that everyone in our round are doing now, like such incredible, amazing things. It really gave me the confidence and the boost that I needed to be like, no, you could do this. This is the one life that you have to live.
Oh, and I love it. And it's not so much either or lifestyle or thinking, right? Like that alone, just you talking about your career and like, oh, I can do what I went to school for and I can get my life coach certification.
Yeah.
And it almost like your whole story too, there's like a level of letting things unfold naturally as they need to. I talk about like gears. You're not like trying to jam gears, you're letting one gear go at a time and then it zips up in the right way. So I love everything that you just said. That was beautiful and
Yeah.
amazing. I'm
Like,
so excited for you about the life coaching thing, by the way. I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like I wish I had a life coach certification. I would love to teach life coaches. It's so
oh my
fun.
gosh, that would be incredible. But like I was saying, like I had that huge plan that I had mapped out, like, 5, 10 years plus in my mind of what my life was going to be with my ex. And now I'm realizing that like I really don't need to have this huge elaborate plan mapped out to a T in order to have like, something to work towards or this amazing life. And so I'm actually really just enjoying seeing like it's like I was saying, when I signed up for the program, all of a sudden things started to fall into place. Like I got this great job that's so flexible that allows me to do other things. And, then I was able to attend all the calls and that kind of thing. So things are just unfolding, I feel like, how they should.
Mhm.
And I know I always say this to you all the time, but how you taught us the three tiers of trust, that was something that just resonated with me so, so much, just having trust in that higher power. And I hadn't realized like how much faith I had lost in trusting that the universe has a plan, or that things are all unfolding for me and not, happening to me. Uh,
Yes.
so
It's all
that was a big
happening perfectly in divine timing. So
thing.
good. I love the three layers of trust. I love teaching that concept. So good. The other thing that I was thinking about when you were talking too is like recreating your identity. We have to recognize that identity itself is ever evolving. It's always changing and it always will. So I think it's getting really comfortable with the natural uncovering and unfolding of who you are and who you want to become. Um, I don't know why this example keeps like hitting my brain. Like I'm supposed to share it with you guys. It's such a random example, but moving here to Florida, I got into a relationship with Jake. And I thought about this the other day where a lot of my friends are his friends. And I was like, oh, I kind of want to like have my own group of friends. And I went to the dog park by accident. Like I was walking one day and now I went to the dog park at like the perfect timing. Again, like natural unfolding. I was supposed to be at that spot at that time. And there's this amazing group of people. Um, they're all retired, which is really funny to me. So I'm hanging out with all these people who are retired, taking their dogs to the dog park, and we go there from every day from 9:30 to 10:30. And I'm like, that's a part of my identity now. And I got to choose that inside of a relationship or outside of a relationship. So I think it's really fascinating to think about too, is like it regardless of whether or not you're in a relationship or not, you're always evolving and recreating your identity. So recognizing that too, I think takes a lot of the pressure off of it, because I think as we're going through a breakup, we're like, oh, what do I do? Like you said, like that panic feeling. And it's like, oh, this is just the next transition of me uncovering who I am. And from like a very like woo woo standpoint, if you think about a heart being broken, it's breaking open, which means you're opening up to an even more authentic version of yourself, which I think is so cool because when you're no longer in the relationship anymore, you're not spending too much time or energy doing what that other person wants to do. You are literally forced to sit with yourself and figure out, what do I want to do?
Yeah.
What do I want to do? Where do I want to go? How do I want to spend my time? And not just relying on someone else deciding and then you default going along with it. And I really noticed that in my breakup. I talk to you guys about this all the time, but like football, it was just so clear to me after the breakup that I had been only watching football and getting so into football because of my ex, because I went weeks without seeing a football game. And I was like, oh my God, there's that whole other world out there where people like really love football. And I totally forgot about it and haven't watched it for like so long. Right.
Yeah, so true.
I love
And I
it.
think
Go ahead.
that was a huge thing too, because I was, for the first time in a very long time, like no longer a student, no longer a girlfriend, no longer living in the city that I had been accustomed to. So, I was basically, everyone in my family kept saying, you have such a clean slate. Like, this is an amazing thing. Like, this isn't a terrible thing. And it took me a while not to resist it. But once I stopped resisting and realizing like this is actually a really incredible thing, like you're saying, I just started opening up to my most authentic self and realizing the things that I genuinely like to do.
I'm so glad you brought that up. We need to talk about that because you are not the only person that's like, bitch, this blank slate stuff, like this is hard. It is a blank
Yeah.
slate. It's not a good thing. It's a terrible thing. So, how did you make that transition and how did you stop? You said the word resisting it, which was so great, but how did you stop resisting? Let's call it like blank slate syndrome.
It definitely was not easy, but I think the thing especially that I know for sure that I struggled with was becoming comfortable feeling uncomfortable. Like I tried so hard to buffer with anything I could come up with, keep my schedule so packed and busy to not have to feel the feels of feeling so out of place, so uncomfortable. And so once, we started, especially in the program, really diving into this, just sitting there and feeling the feelings of I'm feeling so incredibly out of control in my life right now, I started to realize that I was like, wait a minute, like this isn't the end of the world. Like I still am healthy. I still have a roof over my head. Like I still have a loving and supporting support system around me. Um, yeah, so I just started to realize that I was making it in my brain to be this like horrible thing that like you can't talk about, like nobody should like talk about that kind of thing. And so then once actually let myself feel uncomfortable, then I realized that I was making it to be this most dramatic thing in my mind that I really didn't want it to be or need it to be anymore.
Yes. And then when you're not in that panic mode, it's easier to look at a blank slate and be like, oh, this just gets to be fun and I get to paint whatever I want on here. And it doesn't mean that I can't erase it if I don't like it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's definitely things that, I tried like, different workout classes and things like that I was like, I'm going to be different, recreate myself and do these different things. And I was like, absolutely not. No, that's not for me. I just need to like do the things that I know that I enjoy doing. So I don't know. It was like a fun time. It ended up being more of like a fun thing than it was this horrible thing.
I love it. So good. So let's talk more about the control. You mentioned you felt like you had no control, that someone had all the say, right? And where did you land on this and how did you get there?
Um, I think a little bit like how I had mentioned that when he had ended the relationship, like he was very firm on this is it, this is the end. And that was that. Like we didn't have any communication after that. There was no trying to convince him otherwise, that kind of thing. And so I just remember, like crying to my family and my friends and just saying, like he got to make all the decisions. Like he didn't even talk to me about it. Like we could have talked about it. We could have worked through it or, like he just completely, he wanted a different life. He wanted something else. And I felt like he was getting everything that he wanted and had all the like the power, the control. And I was getting like just left in the dust and having to like pick up the pieces and try to make something of it again. Um, and so now I definitely feel like I I did have control in that situation, but I didn't realize that like I was giving up my own control. Like I could have definitely said, many of times I want to do my own thing, I'm going to move on or that sort of thing, but I didn't feel secure in my identity. I didn't feel secure in what I was doing with my life or what I was going to do career-wise or I was feeling a lot of guilt and shame and pressure for not, wanting to do the things that I quote unquote should be doing. And so, after going through the program, I realized like I definitely did have control. I just was choosing not to use it.
Yes. And I think a lot of times when we do that, it's because we have to face something that's even scarier than not having control.
100%, 100%. And
Mhm.
I was like, maybe if I tell myself that he has all the control, I won't have to admit that I'm fucking terrified to do this on my own, like that like I was terrified to like start new.
Yes, so good, right? So instead of facing that terrified feeling, I'll instead just feel out of control because
Yes.
blaming it on him, saying it's like outside of my ability to even tackle this. So then I don't have to feel terrified.
Yes, 100%. That's exactly what it was.
So do you feel like your turning point for that was once we got to the place of like feeling feelings and then you felt a little bit safer to experience the feeling of terrified?
Yeah, I definitely felt that I wasn't in a place to feel comfortable with it on my own. I definitely needed the like camaraderie of our group and our coaching, back and forth. And then I felt like, okay, like I can finally sit and feel the feelings of it and, see what comes up. And if I need like SOS immediate help, like I had like that outlet to turn to. And I just, I felt that like right away in the group from the very first day. I just remember like getting off our introduction call and having like the weight of the world off my shoulders, because I was like, finally, I can like let the shit go. Like I'm ready to do that.
Oh, so good. I love
Yeah. It
it.
was incredible. I just remember that feeling. It was incredible. Just
Ugh.
feeling like I'm in a safe place.
What is one thing so for anyone who might be listening who feels just so out of control of their own life, like things are happening to them, like they didn't make this decision, they didn't want this decision. If it was up to them, they would be working on the relationship with their ex. What would be like one piece of advice of like where they could start?
Um, I definitely feel like something that was huge for me is I would start to feel my worst or, extremely panicked or anxious, that kind of thing, like at night when the day is like starting to die down and you can't keep yourself so busy, distracting yourself with a million things or plans. And so I started creating this rule for myself of just like taking a deep breath and going to sleep. And if I still woke up in the morning feeling like, I was out of control or that I had the weight of the world on my shoulders still, that I would allow myself to like freak out about it and, cry and do whatever I needed to do. And, 9 out of 10 times, like I would go to bed and then I would wake up in the next morning and I would feel like I'm actually not feeling so, anxious or overwhelmed by this anymore. So something I learned from the podcast was just like having that outlet of like writing things down, like the grief bubble, and just like letting things be. And so I did a ton of just like, I guess I want to say word vomit. I don't know if that's like the appropriate, term for it, but just writing down every single thought that I was having.
A thought
And
download, right?
yes,
Thought
a thought
download.
download. That's
Mhm.
what it is. That sounds way better. Just like just writing everything down and just sitting with it, and then the next morning it would be crazy, like how I just wasn't overwhelmed or bombarded by those thoughts as much. Or I started, looking back and going through them. I started to realize that I was having just these crazy thoughts that I knew weren't true, but it just felt easier to think the worst.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. So then let's talk a little bit about safety and security within finances. So, where were you with all of this pre program? Where are you now? And what would you tell someone that was feeling the same way you were at the beginning of the program around this? And any kind of like tips for them? Just give us a conversation about that. Can we talk about
Yeah,
that?
so that was definitely a huge major part of a lot of my panic and anxiety, because I was coming from, many, many years of graduate school with a ton of student debt. I had always felt that, because I have my partner, that it's all going to be okay because we have, two dual incomes and that kind of thing, that it's all going to work out just fine. And so when our relationship ended, I remember immediately, like, one of my first thoughts was, oh my God, like, what am I going to do? I have all of this debt and I'm just starting out, I'm not going to be making all this money right away. Like,
And
it
this
was,
is super, yeah, I want to talk about this too, because it's super important that you guys recognize too that all of this still has to do with identity.
mhm,
Like recreating an identity around, I am the person who is safe and secure in my own finances.
yeah,
And I think the beauty about, I love that you brought up the dual income, because one of my things that I made so important in my life was I was going to be the person, I was going to create an identity for myself that I create just as much, if not more, than what I would have created in my relationship with my significant other.
yeah.
And it's like huge to live within that identity. So to continue, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I
Oh,
just want to make
no.
sure that people are looping it back to identity because
Yeah,
of what you just said, like thinking about what you were making the debt mean about you, making, what were you making going to school for something that you might not be interested in anymore mean about you.
yeah.
All of the thoughts that you have about yourself that you're making from your breakup or any kind of shame, that all has to do with your self concept, with the identity that you have of yourself. So important. Continue.
Yeah, so I definitely did not have the confidence in myself that, or, the belief that I could be out on my own. Um, with the amount of debt that I had. And we also had just gotten this puppy at the time. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I just was, having major panic. I think a huge part of it was around the financial reason. And I absolutely hated, dreaded, just felt so terrible about the fact that not that I relied on him for, financial help, but that I needed him, I guess you could say, like I absolutely hated that. And so that was when we were creating our goals and different things. That was definitely something that was a huge part on my brain of just how can I get myself to this place where I feel so badass, so confident in getting myself into, my own life financially and, emotionally, all of that stuff. Um, and so I started to realize that that was, again, another major part of my life that I was hardcore, crazily resisting. And a huge reason why I was resisting it was because I kind of created it to be this like big bad thing that like everybody doesn't want to talk about. And I didn't want to actually look at the data, right? Like I knew that I had a ton of debt, but I didn't want to go and actually like look at the data and figure out the exact amount of it and things. And so once I did that, had my initial panic and freak out, but then I started doing my thought work around it, it started to become a little bit more relieving in the fact that, okay, now I have numbers and data that I can work with and figure out like a logistical plan. And I, do have my loving and supporting family that they were like, of course, come, stay with us for a while as long as you need. And so I stopped resisting that as, oh my God, like what does my life come to? I have to move back home with family. You know what I mean? And I started thinking about it as, okay, I have this amazing safe place that I can stay. I have extra help with Murray if I ever need it. And I can save all this money that I'm making in the meantime and start creating this, super realistic plan of how I will get out of the debt on my own. And I feel so good about that because it's something that I'm doing all on my own, like I don't need someone else.
Ah, preach. Like so good, so empowering. Like the way that I feel as you talk through that. I can't wait for other Bravehearts to like hear that and have the same feeling that you're having because doesn't that feel so powerful?
Yeah, it definitely it doesn't feel like a suffocating situation anymore. It feels like this is a situation that I may not love in my life, but I'm definitely going to overcome it. And I truly believe that.
Oh, so good. I think there's nothing like being like getting yourself into a situation where you're creating it all in a way that no one can take away from you. Like that it's so crazy because I don't know if I ever shared this on the podcast, but I wrote a letter to my ex like 2 or 3 months after the breakup. And one of the very last lines in that um email was I finally realized I have to create a life that I love on my own so that no one takes it away like you did. I was super victimy when I wrote this letter. It's really hilarious. But that was like the start of who I am today, of creating this life that I love so much that no one can take away because I created it. And that's what I'm doing still to this day. It's like I'm in a new relationship and I'm still to this day recreating, evolving my self concept, like figuring out and uncovering things that I love. I mean, even now, it's like I'm uncovering things that I love about myself or love to do that I identify with that I didn't then 5 years ago when I was going through my breakup. And I go out and I try to create that with or without a partner. And it's just so cool. I love it
Yeah,
so
I think
much.
that's I think honestly that's the best part. I mean, I definitely would say that a huge, obvious part of the program is that I did get over my ex and I don't have any desire for him anymore. I think he's a wonderful person, but I'm so like I truly feel grateful now that the situation happened now that I'm on the other side of it because it forced me to jump into this new part of my life and creating this person that I truly feel so authentic and genuine about myself. And I love the tools and things that I've learned to help really create that life.
And when you go to create a partner and
Mhm.
you feel like that, and you are your most aligned and authentic version of yourself, not only creating that partner is going to be easier because it's going to be like to weed through it. We were talking. So you're in the next chapter mentorship. We're going to
Yes.
have Patty come back after the next chapter mentorship. But um, when you were saying the other day, talking about dating and attracting, like who am I attracting and how am I attracting these people? Because you have this authentic relationship with yourself that no one can take away, it's going to be so much easier to figure out who aligns with you and who doesn't. And look at how quickly you realized how not in alignment these types of individuals were. And so I think that's such a beautiful thing, because I think if you're not in that space, you're kind of like dabbling with a mixed box of chocolates. You're like, do I
Oh yeah,
like this one or do
100%.
I not?
Yeah.
Right? Versus being like, this is what I want and this doesn't match it. So I'm not even going to dabble with it. Um, so beautiful. I love
Yeah,
it.
and even with that, with dating now and that kind of thing, I just feel, so okay with saying to someone, look, like, it's just not going to work out. Where before maybe I, wouldn't have had that much confidence in myself to know that like I will find the right person, and I'm so okay waiting for that person.
I love it. Eek, too good. Okay, so I think my last question that I have, because you brought it up before, and it sounded like you were actively like applying the podcast, which I think is so beautiful. If any of you are listening and you're really struggling right now, but you haven't actively applied the podcast, I truly would recommend spending time doing the exercises, getting the words on paper or like vocally out loud, because it's so different than just trying to like think through the things versus actually putting pen to paper. But tell us a little bit about, what do you feel like is the difference between listening to the podcast versus actually signing up and being inside of the Get Over Your Ex program?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, the podcast I felt was a great place for me to just start kind of dipping my toe into this, you know, this thought process and the ideas of having the most beautiful, epic life, and not being so consumed by the heartbreak. So I felt like it was kind of a really great, like, comfortable starting place. But then when I finally, joined the program, I was a little apprehensive at first because all of the life coaching and things that I've done in the past has always been one on one. So I was like, oh, I don't know. Like, am I going to get the same experience? Am I going to get all of the help that I may need? What if other people, judge me for the things that I say, or that kind of thing? But I can honestly say that the group setting has been my favorite. Like, I feel like I now prefer that over the one on one setting, because there were so many times that we would show up to those coaching calls and someone else would already be talking about like 10 of the things that were like going through my brain already. And so I felt like it was always so helpful. And I feel like you could always show up your most, raw, authentic self. There were definitely calls where I remember that one call, I couldn't even get the words out because I was crying so much. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember just like the love and support that everyone showed, not only during the call, but afterwards, checking up on you and that kind of thing. And so I felt like the podcast was a great starting place to like kind of get me in that thinking frame of mind. And then once I joined the group, I feel like it was just incredible. Like, I remember just feeling so loved and supported just from like the very beginning. And I looked forward to the calls every week. Like, it was my favorite part of the week. And I know everyone always still says that. But it's just so crazy because I remember right before the program started, I had gotten lunch with some of my good friends, and I was like, I'm a little nervous to start. Like, I felt like it was like going back to school, like meeting your new classmates. And then we actually got lunch again, like right after Christmas when the program ended. And they were like, holy cow, like your presence is just so different. Like, you were just showing up a completely different person. And I just felt like it's because I know that I have all of these people who are in the same kind of frame of thinking as me. They're the same kind of, atmosphere, and we all still chat daily. And so it was just so nice having that community of people, because you love your friends and family, but you don't want to like bombard them all day, every day with everything you're thinking about your breakup or the thoughts that you're having. And so it was just so nice being able to write into the group and being like, hey, I'm having a really shitty day today. Like, I need someone to talk to, and like having, 20 plus people being right there to like support you. And then having your coaching. I mean, that was incredible. I mean, everyone talks about Dorothy, like, like what would Dorothy do? Like, we all want to be Dorothy's.
All right, Patty. So tell me, is there anything else that you want to share with the other Bravehearts? Any words of wisdom or, tips or anything that you think might be helpful to someone who's listening who is having a problem? Well, actually, any problems that are breakup related, but also specifically around like recreating their identity.
Yeah. So I think that the biggest thing that would have helped me back then was just, just saying to myself or to anyone who, it would help, that it's okay to like let your heart just break. It's okay to totally just feel heartbroken and devastated and to, feel all the feels. And somehow things slowly, start to work themselves out. And something that, I definitely tried to do was have all the answers, in 5 minutes. I was like, I need to know how everything's going to play out like right now. I can't be patient about this. But, just taking it one day at a time, it truly is a real thing. Like, it truly does help. But taking those days one day at a time and implementing the tools that Dorothy talks about all the time, the thought work and just using those resources, it's incredible how much your life can change from one week to the next. And if you do join the program, by the end of the 3 months, you won't even remember half the things that you felt were so devastating and earth shattering in the beginning of the program, for sure. And definitely the big thing for me was to stop resisting and just let it be, So I think that was always my biggest advice, is just if you just stop resisting and let it be, things will definitely fall into place how they should be, for sure.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Patty. We appreciate your time. Thank you so much. I know that the Bravehearts listening are so appreciative of you sharing your journey. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate you coming on, and I'll talk to all of you Bravehearts later. Love you. If you're loving the How to Get Over Your Ex podcast and you want to learn how to get over your ex in 3 months or less to build a life better than the one you thought you had with your ex, I would like to personally invite you to my next group course where we take everything you've learned here on the podcast and apply it to your life. Come check it out at www.lifecoachdorothy.com.